Hello and welcome to Chaos im Kopf, another episode. I am not alone here today. That's why you have to endure again with my English, German-ish accent because I have a wonderful interview guest today. Today with me is Diederik Wolsak. He has been the biggest inspiration for me this year. And before we start into the interview with Diederik, I would like to share a little story how I stumbled upon his work, because it truly was stumbling upon it. I was visiting a friend in Amsterdam and someone had a yard sale. And someone was moving out. They put all their furniture and everything on the street, and there was a book, just one book. And I felt drawn to it because it had the title on it, 6 Steps to Freedom. And if you know me a little bit, you know that my life goal is to find inner freedom. So of course, I took the book home to my friend, and as a joke, I told her, maybe this book will change my life. And then I opened it, and it had a quote inside. It had a little bookmark inside with a quote of Rumi, which said, "What you seek seeks you." And I was amazed by this whole coincidence, serendipity, whatever. And I read the book and it was absolutely fantastic. Diederik's work is the most efficient work I've ever stumbled across, how to deal with limiting beliefs and how to really free yourself internally on the deepest level. And this is how I stumbled upon him. And now he's here with me and I'm super honored. So please, Diederik, it's so nice you're here. Introduce yourself. What do you do? What is your work? How are you today?
Well, today I'm a little fuzzy, but what do I do? For the last 30 years, I've been actively involved in transforming my self-hatred. My self-hatred was originated in 3.5 years in concentration camps in Indonesia, my first 3.5 years. And after that, after coming out of the camps, I was an absolutely impossible child. I was angry. I was irrational. Later on, I became psychotic on many occasions. I started drinking. I fought with everybody, argued with everybody. In other words, I was on an incredible path of highly efficient self-destruction, but not sufficient enough to actually kill myself. So, fortunately, I didn't go quite that far. But there came a point about 30 years ago where, just after I turned 50, where I really reached the point of either something has to change, I have to find a path, or I'm going to stop hanging around here and making everybody miserable and being miserable full time and drinking myself to death. So that was the point. And at that point, I came across a wonderful text called The Course in Miracles, which I had come across 2 years earlier. And 2 years earlier, I read a line in the Course that said, sin is lack of love as darkness is lack of light. And I thought, that's brilliant. And then I realized that the next few words were about God and the Holy Spirit and the Son and the Father. And I said, that's not for me. I don't do any of that. So I threw it away. 2 years later, I was so desperate that I picked it up. And this time I didn't see any of the Tibetan language. I only saw the message. And the first message that I really got from A Course in Miracles that changed my life immediately was that who you think you are is not who you are. And who you think you are is simply made up at a stage in your life when you do make up a personality or a character or who you think you are. And that is in the first 8 years of your life. Now, the first 8 years of my life were miserable because after the camp, I was sent to foster home, and I wasn't allowed to talk to my parents for 2 years. And so by the time I was 10, I was full of rage, full of anger, really, really a very difficult little boy, sent to therapists, and I refused to say a word. And so I went through therapist after therapist and just wasting their time by just sitting there, and they could ask whatever they wanted. And I never answered, I never spoke back. So that became my life. And that came very simply now, looking back at it and knowing what my work is about, that every single person on the planet is a trauma victim. And I know the word trauma is being thrown around a lot lately. And the people that have what they call legitimate trauma, which is usually sexual abuse at an early age, or physical abuse, or abandonment of some time, but usually something really big, that is allowed to be called trauma. In my work, I have become to realize that every single one of us has a trauma story. Every single one of us has a moment where suddenly the idea that they are loved is destroyed. It's not destroyed, it becomes hidden by a belief that's formed at that very moment. And that belief and the set of beliefs that subsequently are created within my mind become the barriers to love with which I live. And if I hadn't come across this work and I haven't drawn the conclusions out of it that I've drawn out of it, I would still believe that my character is despicable. I would still believe that everybody has a very good reason to hate me, because that's who I thought I was. But really getting that who you think you are is not who you are, and that you can, in effect, transform any belief you want to transform. So people come to us with what would be called classical trauma, a lot, but they also come to us with what seem to be very minor upsets. And the minor upsets are just as devastating. In my book, I describe a really striking example of that, and that was a man who came to see me about 25 years ago, and his problem was that he couldn't eat in the presence of another person. Now, that's a remarkable diagnosis. There's no diagnosis for it. You can go to DSM-5 and try to find out what would you label this. There's no label for it. So in a normal session, after about an hour, I have a pretty good idea what her beliefs are, and then we can start to really transform them. But at the end of this hour, I had no idea where this came from. But at the end, I said, is your mother still alive? Because often I found that if I can't find the core beliefs in cognitive work, then very often some light can be shone upon it by the mother with regard to the birth process or the early time of the person on the planet. So I said, is your mother still alive? And he said, yes. And I said, would she, by any chance, be willing to come to the next session? And he said, well, I'll ask her. And a week later, he came with his mother. And I said, this is the story. Your son, who is successful in every part of his life, he's handsome, he's wealthy, he makes a good living, perfect life, but he can't eat in public. Can you tell me a little bit about his birth and his early life? So the mother said, yes, I can. I was pregnant, and the man by whom I was pregnant, this man's father, left me when I was 6 months pregnant. And then a month later, I met an absolutely wonderful man, and we fell in love, and we married, and he became the de facto father of this man that's here with us now. And I said, that sounds all really, really wonderful. And he said, well, there's one problem, she said. And the problem was that he was pathologically jealous of any affection, particularly with regards to my breast and my son. And he would not allow me to breastfeed in public. He actually wouldn't allow me to breastfeed at all. I had to feed the bottle, and I refused. So what did I do? I hid in the closet, and I breastfeed him in private. Bingo. At that moment, a 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old boy decides that eating in public is dangerous. That's an incredibly traumatic event. And there's no way you can get at it in a way other than what I've described, by really going into what's going on at a very, very deep level. Because this could not have been resolved as to that's where it is and that's how it happened. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be resolved at that level. Because very often people don't have memories. Like this man had no memory of his mother hiding in the closet to breastfeed him. Then what you do is you simply go to what is the meaning you've given to eating in public, for example, restrictive to this person. What meaning have you given that? What's the fear that comes up? And once you know what the fear is that comes up and what meaning you've given it, then you still get back to a core belief. In other words, it's just not safe to eat in public. There's a very, very huge fear of eating in public, which he got energetically transmitted from his mother. So that's a very long introduction. I'm not sure whether people know me any better by now, but just to say that to realize that whatever you've done in your life, whatever. I mean, I've done a lot of lousy things. I was really a nasty creature. I've done a lot of really unpleasant things. And to finally realize that none of those touched the essence of my being. And that whoever you think you are, who you truly are, has never been changed, has never been touched. Who you truly are, I always compare it as a pure gold nugget. Now, what we do with our little egos, which is a set of beliefs, we take that nugget and we make it into things. Some people make it into beautiful jewelry. They live a very wonderful life. Other people, like me, turn it into a weapon or a bullet or a dagger. But the beautiful thing is that gold is still the same. Nothing happened to the gold. So to recognize that whatever has happened in your life, whoever has done anything in your mind to you, or whatever you've done to other people, the absolute unchangeable innocence of you is still who you are. And that's huge news to a lot of people.
It really, really is. First of all, thank you for this wonderful and deep introduction. I think this was worthy of my intro, as telling everyone that you have been the biggest inspiration to me this year. I love how deep your work it is, and I love how profound it is. What comes to mind right now is that I 100% believe that whatever we believe becomes our truth. Because even though if it's very much stored for us at a super subconscious level, that, for example, we don't feel worthy of something, in our actions, we then will always sabotage our life accordingly, that actually our outside life fits our inside beliefs. This is something that I believe to be true, and that freaks me out because sometimes I notice I sabotage myself in some areas of my life. And it's really hard to get to the super deep ground of the belief that is actually kind of driving myself in this certain area of my life. And it's also super scary. It feels super powering. It feels like I have this Windows 98 update of a belief system inside of my psyche that is kind of guiding the ship. But I don't want to have this program anymore. I want to update the program, but it's really hard to get to it. It's really hard to change it. And it's also really hard, maybe the question that kind of comes with it too, it's really hard to feel it and deeply embody it and not just to think about it on a cognitive level. Because on a cognitive level, I might be able to tell myself, Caro, you are good enough. You are great. Don't you worry. But if I don't believe it and feel it on a very deep level, the deep belief will still run my ship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the word really hard, which you used 4 times in the last 2 minutes. That comes from a belief. Who's the I that says it's hard? So I'll give a little background on the model of the mind that I work with. And the first part of the model is the ego. And what is the ego? It's a set of beliefs that I believe is me. The second part is that nugget of gold that has never changed. Call it the capital S self, call it God, call it the Buddha mind. It doesn't matter what you call it. That is there. It has never been changed. It's never been touched. It waits for you to say, I need to have an answer. I need to look at this differently. Who is going to say that? The ego is never going to say that. So we need a third part in this model. And the third part is what we call the decision maker. And the decision maker is the one that has to say, okay, I just thought about this process and my ego says this is going to be really hard. And it's going to say it 3 or 4 times. In other words, I really believe it's going to be hard. And if I believe it's going to be hard, it's going to be hard. So the decision maker then turns to the loving self and says, tell me, is this hard? And if the question is genuine, the answer is immediate. So what are you talking about? There's nothing to it. It's already done. So that's the first hurdle to overcome, the belief that something is hard, because that will convince me to not do it. I'll do it a few times. It's literally like the 1st of January when everybody signs up for a gym membership and they go for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then it's rainy today. I don't feel like it, or whatever. I have a hangover. I have an appointment. I can't make it this week. And before you know it, you're not going anymore. So the decision maker has to become an adult. And that's the one that has to develop the discipline. The ego is unlimitedly disciplined. It never stops. It will never stop beating me up. That's a given. It will never stop questioning who I think I am. It will never tell me you're actually a loser. It will never tell me you're a fraud. It will never stop telling me all these things that I've used to hear. Now I hear them quietly and I smile. Because now I know it's that little 4-year-old. And that 4-year-old is still deeply hurt and still deeply in guilt and still wants to tell me that it knows how to take care of me, but it doesn't. But if you look at what's going on in the planet right now, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Gaza, whether it's US, wherever you look, it's run by 4-year-olds. There's no decision maker on the planet at the moment. And nobody steps in and say there has to be another way. So to get to what you said, sometimes it's hard. And what makes it much, much easier is to be honest with your feelings. So we'll just run through the process, maybe for your listeners, that they have an idea. The first step is to recognize that I'm upset. And sometimes that's not easy because I'm in the habit of being a little bit irritated, or I'm in the habit of worrying, or I'm in the habit of being a little disappointed in my life. And so I don't notice it anymore. It's become chronic. So to learn to feel is incredibly important. So I'm upset. I'm not at peace. The second step is even harder because that says this is about me. This is not about Gaza. This is not about Trump. This is not about what's happening in Ukraine. This is not about Auschwitz. This is about me. And that step is resisted enormously, of course, because we have on the planet 7 billion or 7 milliard, I think you call it in German, people that are all addicted to victim. And the victim cannot stand hearing it's about me. Because the victim is absolutely convinced it's about you. It's your fault. Why I'm upset? Because of Gaza. Why I'm upset? Because of Trump. Why I'm upset? Because I don't have any money. That's not why I'm upset. It's about me. So the step to accept that step is a faith-based position. And the only way, I just have to clear my throat for a second. And the only way to make that acceptable is to also jump onto the faith-based position that nothing has ever gone wrong. That whatever has happened in my life has always, at some level that I don't recognize yet, been a gift. Once I accept that as a premise, as a faith, as a foundation of the work, then step 2 is okay. Because then I learn to say, well, it's about me. So now I'm going to be an opportunity to heal something. And that's much more welcome than, well, if it's all about me, it's all my fault. It might as well kill me now. Not going to do that. Step 3 is the feeling. And feeling is incredibly important to this work. There's a little cliche in English that says you have to feel it to heal it. And I didn't know what feeling was. I knew what rage was, and I knew what numb was. So I made up a feeling sheet of I think there's 60 feelings on it, or 80 feelings. I can't remember how many there are on there, because I had to learn to feel. And I've discovered over the years that a lot of people really don't know how they feel. But to know how you feel and to be able to be in that for a moment and to really feel it. So when you said it's really hard, with those 2 words came a feeling. And my hunch is you were not even aware of it. But you will become aware of that. So when you hear yourself say something that's going to be really hard, or it's going to take a long time, is another one I always hear too. There's a feeling associated with that. That feeling becomes your path back. So people always say, invariably will tell me, I have no memories before 15. And that's true for a lot of people, because for a lot of people, things happen in their early youth that they've blocked. They've had an out-of-body experience, they've had dissociated, but whatever they did, they've blocked that part of their life. But the feeling, amazingly enough, will take you back. And eventually will take you back to an incredibly early memory. I had a friend who had memories of in utero through her feelings. And I thought, that's a little over the top. And people do get carried away with this process. So I sort of smiled at it and ignored it. But then something happened at the center maybe 15 years ago where everything went wrong. It was unbelievable. The water went out, the power went out. We had a client who was suicidal. It was just a total shit show. And I had a feeling that I didn't recognize. And it was also a moment where I didn't really, I've had too much to do to just focus back in and do a quick process. So I had to wait till the next day. And I did a holotropic breathing. And out of the breathing came that feeling took me back. And the belief was I should not have been born. Well, I'd heard that from a lot of clients, but I'd never had that thought. I didn't think that was one of my beliefs. So I stayed in the feeling. And it came from a moment just before I was born, where my mother and father were fleeing into the mountains to escape from the Japanese without success, but they did for a while. And what do you think she was thinking? Not a good time to be pregnant. I got that message. So that's amazing illustration of how what people normally call subconscious or unconscious really just means I've chosen to forget it. There's nothing unconscious or subconscious. It's all there. I just chosen to bury it under a whole bunch of stuff, and I don't want to look at it because if I look at it, says the ego, it'll be very painful. And why does the ego say that? Because it knows that if I do look at it, I'll be healed. And what does healing mean? No ego. So the ego will do whatever it can to prevent me from accessing early memories. Don't be discouraged. Back to the feeling. Allow that feeling to take you back to when you were a little girl or a little boy, and there will come a memory when somebody says something or did something, and suddenly you remember, that's when I first felt that. Wow. That feeling has a message for me. That feeling tells me something about me right now. There's one story in the book about a man who was clinically depressed, absolutely miserable, horrible life, worked his ass off, made a lot of money, worked in New York. He was a stockbroker in New York. And as you know, those people can make 5 million in one day, lose 20 the next. And there was not a life worth living. And we couldn't figure out what was going on for him. Then we did this process, and he came immediately up with the memory that he was 3 years old. His father was a brain surgeon at one of the major hospitals in his city. And he'd been playing in the garden. He'd found a little beetle. And he came running into this dad's study, his dad's office, with this little beetle. He said, "Daddy, Daddy." His daddy turned around and raised one eyebrow. What was the message? We don't have fun here. We don't have joy here. At 3 years old, he picked up that message. After our process, which was, I think we did 2 sessions together, 5 years later, I got a letter from him saying, I've quit my job. You won't believe what I'm doing. I went back to university. I'm now a kindergarten teacher. I love my life. I make no money at all, but it's the best life in the world. A simple example of what nobody would consider traumatic, but that's a trauma. And that's why I'm hammering on the word trauma, because it's, to my mind, it's misused at the moment. It's made into something really special. I have trauma, you don't. Here's the story. Here's my story. We all have trauma. So now we know what we told ourselves. So his message was, we don't have fun. Joy and fun and discovery, that's not for what we do here. He took that on and he believed, I'm not supposed to have fun. The forgiveness then is the 5th step. And that says very simple, forgive me for the belief that I don't deserve to be joyful, that I don't deserve to have joy in my life. And the answer comes from the loving self and says, that's not true. You made that up. You made it up when you were 3, but it's never been true. And you can let it go. Then your last step is, forgive me that I've forgotten that who I am is joy. And that all I have to do is remove the barriers to that awareness, and I will be living in joy. Thank you, God, that is the truth. That is the truth. Then you go back and you check in, how do you feel now? You go back to, this is really hard. When you have that thought now, how does that feel? And inevitably, the feeling is considerably lighter or completely gone. I want to say just a few words about the word God, because a lot of people that come to the center have a big problem with that word, and so did I. Because I come from a Christian background, and I was kicked out of Bible class when I was 12 because I called the Lord's Prayer simply begging, and that didn't go over well with the minister. So my relation to the Christian God has not been very successful. But the God we're talking about is simply everything you see. So everything is God. Trump is God. The people that murder babies are still God. That gold nugget is still there. People who retaliate and murder thousands of people are still God. It's still part of the same God. And that particular at the moment is very difficult for people to see. But if we don't see it, we'll continue on this murderous path that we've been on for 100,000 years. How long have we been around the planet? I always forget how many years people have been walking around killing each other. Like simply because I don't recognize the self as my essence. And so the more you and I can enter into relationships where it is the capital S self in relationship with the capital S self, the more peace there will be on the planet. As long as we stay in relationship with the small s self, we'll be in conflict. Because the small s self is lacking something. The small s self needs something. The small s self is angry about something. And it will always project. And it will always feel hard done by, and will always feel unfairly treated, and will always feel like a victim. So till I recognize I've never been a victim, I made that up. I'm not a victim. And I'm so grateful that I've been in the camp because that's a pretty strong example of overcoming an idea of victim. I never was a victim in the camp. Everything that happened in the camp happened. And what my freedom is, and where my freedom lies, is in the ability and the willingness and the birthright to interpret it differently. So I can interpret everything as I'm a victim. Or I can say there's another way of seeing it. What's the gift in this? So when I had my stroke a month and a half, 2 months ago, the first question was, what is this for? I didn't think it was any fun, I can tell you that. It's not something I would recommend anybody to do, but first of all, I'm unbelievably lucky that it was mild. And second of all, it's just another gift. So I can't think as quickly or as clearly as I could a year ago. That's true. So surrender. This is what I'm now. This is what I can do now. And I probably won't shoot a brilliant round of golf ever again. Could be. That's okay. Doesn't change who I am. Questions?
No, of course, many questions, but currently I have a need to summarize everything you've said, since I know I read the book, I've been to your coaching, I'm very much part of your teachings already, but I can understand that, or I guess someone who is listening to you possibly for the very first time might be currently still a little bit like, wow, this was a lot to process. So let me try to summarize it shortly. So what I heard Diederik say was basically that we all come to this world and we are inherently good, inherently innocent, inherently love. But what happens when we are many times little children, something in the outside world happens, and then we start to make it mean something about us. For example, let's say your father had to leave early for work and was a little bit harsh. And then instead of just letting it be an objective reality, we actually kind of interpret the behavior and make it mean something about us. It means that I am not good. It means that I am not lovable. It means that something is wrong with me. Otherwise, the external world wouldn't behave the way it did. And this is kind of the root, the first root of a belief that is starting to grow. And the deeper this belief goes, the more also we come up with stories in our head. Maybe the story of, oh, why is the world the way it is? I'm such a victim. Why can nothing ever go right for me? So this is kind of then the problematic situation we can be in. And what Diederik is proposing is a 6-step method, how we can actually discover and release these very deep-rooted, possibly limiting, harming, painful beliefs, which are not true because they're not who we are, but we think this is who we are.
Yeah, and that's why we use the word belief.
Exactly. Yeah. And the process is, just if I summarize it shortly, is that we first notice, hey, I'm not feeling 100% at peace right now. I'm not 100% happy. So Diederik is saying in his books that, and I'm just now saying what I read in the books, is that if you're not 100% happy, then there is a belief suddenly happen. Like there is a belief at running the system. If you're not feeling 100% peace, then there is something you can uncover, let go, or so what you do is, number one, you notice, okay, I am actually not feeling 100% at peace. I'm upset. Number two is you take responsibility for it and you actually understand and admit it is about me. Even though my mind wants to tell me it's about the outside world, it actually is about me. Number three is you really recognize the feeling. What is it that I'm feeling? Is it sadness? Is it helplessness? Is it happiness? Okay, maybe when you are happy, you wouldn't do the process, but is it like boredom, whatever? And while feeling this feeling, this is kind of like a time traveling machine, which brings you up to the question, when is the first time that you've ever felt this feeling? And then you might remember a situation, something that happened at home, at school, and it can be also a super minor incident that comes up in the moment. And then the question is, in this moment, back then in the past, what have you made it mean about yourself? Have you made the situation that a teacher screams at you, for example, made it mean that maybe you are not clever and you will never be able to have a career where you can use your intellect, something like this? And then you do the letting go, release part of this limiting belief, where you first kind of forgive you tell yourself, I forgive myself for believing that. And in the last step, you remember what you actually are. I forgive myself for forgetting that I actually am infinite wisdom and divinity and love.
Right.
And then after you've done this process and you really felt all the steps too, you can ask yourself, how am I feeling now?
Yeah, you go back to the upset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is just to paraphrase it again in my words, because it's a lot of information, and I really want people to get away how powerful this technique is. I've tried it on myself and it's amazing. It's really, 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 really deep. What I wanted to ask you is, you talked about if you're not 100% happy, then there is this belief. And you talked about that some people have these stories and they rather want to be right or happy. So there's also kind of this decision. Can you talk a little bit about the common challenges you see when people do these 6 steps?
Yeah, the most common challenge is the attachment to the story, because the story is who I am. And so the question that we always ask, who would you be without your story, is a very disturbing question, because nobody knows. I didn't either, because I am my story. And the feelings are all chosen by my beliefs. So my entire experience is chosen by my beliefs. So that's who I think I am. So the idea that that's not who I am is very disturbing. People come to us at the center quite often with diagnoses, maybe depression, maybe bipolar, maybe ADHD, maybe whatever it is. That diagnosis is one of the most dangerous things there is, because that's what I then start believing. I have a good friend who was reading a book, and he was so excited about the book. He says, now I know what my problem is. I have ADHD. I said, no, you don't. That's a label. Once you buy into that label, you will have it. That's for sure. A third of the children in North America are on Ritalin. That's an absolutely devastating path, because that leads to, that's a very easy step from Ritalin to cocaine. A very logical step. So be careful with diagnosis. Be careful with labeling yourself. because a label becomes your personality and it becomes very difficult to undo it. So who would you be without your story is an incredibly important question. The alarm to memory, you used the example of the father being rushed and therefore a little harsh. Another problem we have as children is because parents, maybe mothers more than fathers, are in the habit of saying, "You make me so happy." Well, when you hear that, you say, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" There's nothing wrong with that. Well, what's wrong with that is that your child does not make you happy. Because if that were true and you were in a bad mood, the child is responsible for how you feel. And that's exactly how it works. So we all hear, "You make me so happy" when we're little. And how many of us had a mother or a father that was 100% happy 24 hours a day? Nobody. So we all are responsible for how other people feel. We make that up. That's the guilt we walk around with. And what I call relationship hell, which is very normal in unhealed relationships, is where I hold you responsible for how I feel, and you hold me responsible for how you feel. And to live in what I call a namaste relationship, which is capital S to capital S self, I have nothing to do with how you feel. I don't make you happy or unhappy. My happiness comes from recognizing the self in me. And recognizing the self in me, the capital S self, automatically then recognizes the self in you. And of course, we're happy. But I will recognize the self in you even when you're miserable. So when you're miserable and you're angry or you're crying or whatever's going on for you, and it affects me, then that has nothing to do with you. And in relationships, that is breathtaking. So the people that come to us for relationship work leave with an entirely new idea of what their relationship is for. The purpose of every relationship is to heal the core beliefs that I bring into the relationships. If I'm attracted to someone, it's because we share the same core beliefs. So I'm always attracted to my lessons. My lesson walks in. There's a funny saying that if you feel an attraction, get on your knees and start praying, because all hell is going to break loose. And that's simply because you'll be faced with your beliefs. I don't know if it's in the book, but it's a little story about a conference I was at 18 years ago in California. There were 400 people there, and there was one woman from Argentina that I'd noticed, and I found her mighty attractive. And we happened to be at the end of the conference. We were at Jared Jampolsky's houseboat in Sausalito, and she was there because we were foreign delegates. And we ended up in the kitchen over a glass of wine. I said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a therapist." And she said, "Well, what kind of work?" I said, "Well, I do core belief correction." And she said, "What are my beliefs?" And I said, "This, this, and this." He said, "How did you know that?" I said, "Because we noticed each other. I wouldn't have seen you if you hadn't had those beliefs." So someone who doesn't have my beliefs, but who's very beautiful and whatever else, I'll notice that she's beautiful, but there won't be any attraction. So if you feel an attraction for someone, sit down with them and say, "You and I are heading for a very rocky path because our beliefs are going to kick in and we're coming together to heal that. And maybe as we're healing it, we'll learn what love is." And what is love? Love is simply the namaste, the divine in me knows the divine in you.
Beautiful. Actually, you said in the beginning this quote that sin is the absence of love. And I guess we all deeply long to feel more love, to embrace more love, to be love in all our being.
Mm-hmm.
But it's many times hard for people to access. Now the hard again, you probably mirrored back to me. Hard for people to access this kind of love, even though we're really craving it.
Yeah, but it's in the craving itself that's the problem, because the craving tells me I don't have it. So if I crave for love, I'll keep looking for it and I won't find it. The only thing I have to do is recognize I already have it. And why am I not living in this love is because I still believe my self-made identity. I'm attached to the self I made up. And as long as that self has any attachment, as long as I'm fascinated with my brain, for example, as long as I think I'm smart or talented or whatever idea I come up with, I will not be able to access love. So to truly access love, I have to let go of every idea about myself. There's a wonderful poem that I often use, and I probably used it when I talked to you a couple of months ago, and that's from a Japanese named Bunan. And he said, die while you're alive and be absolutely dead. And then come back and do whatever you want. And what does that mean? He simply meant let go of all your ideas about yourself. In other words, let the ego die, which it won't do, but stop feeding it. Be absolutely dead. In other words, don't believe your thoughts. And then everything will be wonderful. And go do what you want to do. And then the good news is that the gifts, the skills that you developed as an ego are still available to you. I could, when I was full raging ego, which I still am at times, I could debate anyone under the table. I still have that. I still do that. But now I can use it to help someone through a process. So the purpose has changed. But what you do doesn't matter. Who's the I doing it? So if the I doing it is love, I'll have a wonderful expression, the expression of being. Whether that is as a waiter or a dishwasher or a soccer player or a coach, it doesn't matter.
It's fascinating that it's so fundamentally different to what society kind of teaches you or tries to make you want, such as really try to identify yourself with things, with a title, with a house, with a career. Really try to actually work hard to find all these things to identify yourself with until you have a big CV with lots of stuff that you identify with. And now when we do this work, it makes us notice what a golden cage it actually is and how much it prevents us from just feeling happy and peaceful.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having an impressive CV. Just don't be impressed with it. Just say, yeah, I can do those things. So what? It doesn't say anything about me. So to really recognize, and it's such a big idea that I'm not who I think I am, and to recognize it's my thoughts that cause me pain, nothing else. It's my thoughts that cause me pain. Who's the I thinking? So if I'm in pain, it's my ego thinking. It's my ego telling me what I should be feeling under this circumstance.
It's the identifications with the thoughts, the believing the thoughts, hearing them and thinking that they are true.
Exactly, yeah. A long time ago, when I went to Spain in 1969, I took my dog with me. And it was an incredible dog. It was a big, big German Shepherd cross. Beautiful, totally independent dog. And I slept in a Dachshund, so he was always free to run around. In the morning, I'd whistle and he'd come running. And one morning in Madrid, I whistled and he didn't come running. And he never came back. And I cried for days and days and days. Then about 25 years ago, 30 years ago almost, I had a wolf cross. Fantastic dog. I had him for 12 years. And he disappeared one day. He was also always free because you can't keep a wolf in. He was always out. And then one day he didn't come back. I felt nothing but joy and gratitude. He didn't bring me joy. He was joy. And the joy in me recognized the joy in him. The joy in me was not dependent on him being in my life. And that was a huge, huge demonstration to me that I'm learning something. That I'm learning something, and I'm learning that I cannot lose who I am. I cannot lose love. I am love. I cannot lose it. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm telling people don't cry when your mother dies or your husband dies. You will be upset, absolutely. So would I be. But it's not going to be a life-changing experience. Because the truth will come through really quickly again. I cannot lose love. Who you are is love. When you say, I don't want to have anything to do with you, I say, well, that's okay with me. My joy, my happiness does not depend on anything outside of me. Now, am I 100% perfect in that? No. I have moments, of course. But by and large, if I compare it to how I felt 30 years ago and I now feel now, that it's a different universe. And it's just with this process.
Yeah, it is freedom in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And maybe last question before we go towards the end-ish. In the beginning, you said that this voice inside your head, this critical voice, that it's still there, that it's like this hurt 4-year-old, but now you don't identify so much with what he or she is saying. And this is very interesting or important to know, I guess, that if you practice this, don't get discouraged if you still hear this inner critical voice, because apparently it will always stay with you. But the moment you don't think it's true and you understand it's just a voice inside of you, you actually are free of it.
Exactly. It literally becomes like a 2-year-old. I don't know if you've been around 2-year-olds, but they're not very interesting. They don't have a lot to say. And this little 2-year-old thinks it can run my life. And I said, oh, honey, really? You think you can do that? No. So it loses the power it always had. But it will not lose it till you shine your light on it, till you go in, until you overcome the fear of going deep. Often we got people at the center and then we say, well, this work is about going back to the earliest time of your life. And they say, oh, no, I dealt with that with my therapist. I don't want to go there. Well, then you didn't deal with it with your therapist. Otherwise, you'd say, let's go look. Maybe there's still something left. I don't know. I thought I was done. Maybe I'm not. It will be a joyful discovery. The ego will tell you it's painful because the ego is scared. It knows that this is the end of it. If I am hip to what it says, and if I am aware of what it tries to do, it tries to tell me I should live a life of deep guilt and shame for all the things I did, and it was my fault. Everything was my fault. There's a great moment in the fantastic movie Good Will Hunting. I don't know if you've seen it, Robin Williams and Matt Damon. And at one point, Matt Damon is the client, Robin Williams the psychologist, and at one moment, Robin Williams slams him up against the wall and screams at him, "It wasn't your fault." And he gets it. Suddenly, you realize your mom being unhappy or depressed was not your fault. Your dad drinking was not your fault. Your brother dying in a car accident when you were 7 was not your fault. And all those things are used by the ego to continuously beat you up. Till you say, no, nothing to do with me. That wasn't my fault. I'm innocent. I'm unchangeably innocent. And that's a huge gift. And I so wish that we could parachute into the Palestine-Israel situation and just tell everybody you're innocent. Your brother. It's not your brother physically, but it's the divine being meets the divine being. And that will be the end of it. But we cannot do that because we believe our thoughts, we believe our beliefs, we believe that if I don't have this little piece of land, I don't have an identity. My identity is divine. It's not connected to land or money or things or form. My identity is divine. That's the end of all conflict. There's a great saying in the Course about conflict that says, before there come a conflict, there must be doubt, and the doubt is always about myself. And that's what you're seeing.
If the ego or the self, the little self, not the capital self, but the little self, is causing so much pain and harm and disconnection and even wars, why do you think we even have it in our systems?
Because it's our way to return. If we didn't have the ego kicking me in the shin, or worse, I wouldn't realize that I had work to do. But because I think I'm on the planet, I need a way out, and the way out is offered by the ego. It's going to make it so difficult for me to say there has to be another way. This can't be it. I'm not on the planet. I'm now 81. I'm not on the planet to be miserable for 81 years. That can't be true. So the ego's helped me. tremendously. I gave a talk in Holland years ago, and in January, they always ask me, what are you going to be talking about? And that's in September. Well, I don't know what I'm going to be talking about 5 minutes from now, let alone 6 months from now. So I said, I'm going to talk about the fact that the Holy Spirit and the ego are working hand in hand. And they wrote me back saying, you're crazy. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. But it's true in my mind. Without an ego, I wouldn't know. The ego chooses my feeling. My loving self doesn't feel. My loving self is a permanent state of joy. It's a being. But if I didn't feel, I wouldn't know what my beliefs were. So maybe the ego is not intentionally helping me, but certainly by telling me what to feel and choosing my feelings for me, it loses its camouflage. I can now see what's going on because I'm feeling it. So when you see someone frowning, you can think to yourself, I wonder what he's believing right now. Or somebody's disappointed, or somebody's really mad about what's happening in the Middle East. What are you believing about you? Not about Israel, not about Hamas. What about you? What are you believing about you? That's where the healing is, where world peace starts. And if it's not there, it's not going to be anywhere.
Yeah, the outside world is always a reflection of our internal world.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, Diederik, I can talk on with you forever and ever and ever and ever, and then after forever, ever even more. But I think also, so this is an interview you can actually listen to in your human timeline. Let's wrap it up. And I would like to finish by just offering the space one more time and asking you if there is any other thought or idea, concept, maybe inspiration or quote you want to share with the listeners before we wrap it up.
Well, I'm not sure whether you and I talked about it when we first met, but the word discipline, which I hated with a passion. I thought it was a Teutonic Germanic word that doesn't apply to me because I hate the word discipline, but I recognize that without discipline, I'm not going to do anything. So I have to commit. I have to hear that little voice that says it's going to be really hard, and then have the discipline to pull it back in and say, hang on, is that true? So without discipline, I cannot train my mind, and an untrained mind can accomplish nothing. So it is a mind training, just like a sport. When I played hockey, I trained 4 hours a day. It's the same with this. Are you worth it? Look in the mirror in the morning and say, am I worth it? Am I worth that effort? Because the ego is going to make it difficult. We know that. Are you worth that effort? And when you say yes, you're unstoppable. And when you say, I don't know, or when you say yes, but there's no real conviction behind it, wait till you really are. You can't force it. But once you know you're worth it, discipline becomes easy.
Beautiful. I can deeply recommend your work to anyone. So I know you have an amazing book that I would also like to recommend to everyone. It's called Choose Again, 6 Steps to Freedom. And it's also available in German, which is very nice. But Diederik, let us know, how can we work with you?
Well, at the moment, I'm working very, very little because of my mind. And my mind is a little cloudy and not quite. I don't have the energy level that I did before the stroke. But you can go to the website, choose again, choose-again.com, and you can find me there. And you can book a session if you can't find the time, because I'm blocked up most times. If you can't find the time and you really want to talk to me, then I'll make a time and we'll get together. So it will always happen sooner or later.
Yes.
And come to the center.
Tell us more about the center. 2 sentences.
2 sentences. The Sentence is an incredible place in Costa Rica where we have an amazingly dedicated staff of between 4 and 8 people, and we never take more than 8 clients or 9 clients or so at the most. And all we do there is transform core beliefs. And the beauty of the center is not just that it's in the rainforest and stunningly beautiful. the beautiful thing about the center is that you're surrounded by people who are doing exactly the same work as you are. So when you're there, when I'm in the circle and an outsider comes in, it would take them quite a while to figure out who is staff and who is clients, because we're all doing the same work. I'm doing my work, clients are doing their work, and we support each other in that. And our success rate is outrageously high for things like depression or alcohol or anything. We have over an 80% success rate getting people off medication, all medication. People that come with ADHD, people that are dyslexic, people that have an eating disorder. They all come from a belief. So if you're really serious about healing your beliefs and beginning a life that's truly based on unchangeable love, come spend some time with us. It's fun. It's really a lot of fun.
Amazing, Diederik. Also, this interview was a lot of fun, and it was such an honor to talk with you and to spread your wisdom more into this world. As I've said, I can deeply, deeply recommend your work to anyone. I think it's really no bullshit, going straight to the core, getting to these core beliefs and really letting them go, which is so freeing. So thank you, Diederik, for your time. Thank you for this interview. And I thank also all the listeners who tuned in, for being with us, for enduring my German accent, for
my Dutch accent.
Well, I feel like your English is impeccable, by the way.
Well, I've lived here for 60 years. It should be by now.
Yeah, true. I should leave Germany. I guess that could help. Well, last but not least, as always, I would like to also thank Shuko for the wonderful intro and outro song that I can use. Nothing's gonna change. I thank you, the listener, and I wish everyone who's just tuning in a wonderful day. And once again, deep blessing and thanks to you, Diederik. It has been a true honor.
Thank you, Colin. A pleasure, and we'll do it again sometime.